You're either on the bus or you're off the bus.
Welcome aboard. It's episode 11 of Ridin the Bus, the official Iowa Wild podcast presented by Explore Minnesota. I'm Ben Gislison. He's Joey Goldstein. This is episode 11. Here we are.
Yeah.
We're across into the double-digit threshold now. We had Allie Brown last week. This week, actually, it was funny. I should renege on that. I didn't even ask her. I knew she'd gotten married, yet I just went with Allie Brown. I didn't even think about it. I think she is Allie Brown Kornick, I believe she's going by now. So apologies on that one for getting her name
I'd say shame on
incorrect.
you, but that's a shame on us.
That's a shame on us. We could have both come up
yeah.
with that. So Allie Brown Kornick last week. This week, Brett McLean, assistant coach of the Minnesota Wild and was an assistant coach with the Iowa Wild here, predating his time in Minnesota. He's been there now coming up on 3 seasons. And really, when you talk to anybody that was here with him, I obviously talked to Joe O'Donnell a lot, who I know is very close with Brett. But Joe, we talked to any of the previous coaches that have been here. Everyone adores this guy. And this interview is a perfect example of why. I mean, what a story his hockey career was and coaching career still is. Definitely one of those cases of someone who overcame a lot of adversity and nothing away from the rink adversity, not one of those stories, but just continually being looked over, not being appreciated
having to
for
earn everything that he's
Yes, and really gets into that. And we really take a great journey through his career and learn more about what it is that makes him the person he is today. And it actually makes sense now why I've come to know him a little bit away from the rink too, and just a phenomenal human being, clearly a phenomenal hockey mind. And I think I was thinking about this in the middle of the interview when he was explaining how he's been in every player's shoes for the most part, or skates for the most part, minus that he brought up he can't probably relate to Kirill Kaprizov or Sidney Crosby or these big superstars, but everybody else he can. And it dinged in my head. I went, head coach. I mean, this is a guy who, with that experience, could probably and maybe very well likely will make a fabulous NHL head coach someday.
Yeah, and listen, all due respect to our previous 10 guests thus far, without question.
This includes Bill Guerin, by the way, who we loved. No, I agree with you.
But, like, hands down, I think he's been the best guest we've had so far. We've had great conversations with everybody.
Yes.
And again, I'm not trying to slight anybody who's been on here before.
Hopefully Bill Guerin doesn't get mad
at us. It was just one story after another. The way, and he doesn't know what the questions we're going to ask, but the way he was just seamlessly moving us from one thing to the next that went aligned with how we wanted to move the interview along. Like, it was awesome. There are some unreal stories. I mean, just right off the top, talking about having to file for arbitration and how awkward that the whole situation is. Like, that, it's a unique career, and he's just a fantastic storyteller. We're going to toot our own horns real quick. We've kind of knocked it out of the park with finding great storytellers for all of our guests.
Yes.
But yeah, this has been my favorite conversation so far for sure. And I didn't even say much throughout most of the interview.
I kind of felt bad. I felt bad. I really pirated. The one thing that bleeds very clear when you get through the first 40 minutes of this is, boy, Ben is a super big hockey nerd and just really dove in on this.
Yeah, I laughed a couple times. So, like, you heard me. I was there. You can see me. But, yeah, most of my questions were kind of tailored more to the end of his career and his time, in Des Moines and some family life questions. And yours were more the hockey-related questions, which is totally fine. And when I told you right before we started recording, when you get into a situation like that with certain people, when you get guys talking about their hockey careers and those stories, I could sit back and listen all day long and have no qualms about it.
It was super engrossing and engaging. Those, I think, are the two best ways I would describe it. And in order for that to happen, you have to have a guest that is willing to buy in. And the one thing I noticed, too, sometimes, and this is true of some of our guests as well, and you're taught this in journalism school when you go through it, is you do oftentimes need to throw a few softballs. You need to get them comfortable, try to get them talking. You nailed it with arbitration.
Right off the bat.
He was like, I got a story right away. Bang. And I'm like, okay, here we go. When we're off. There was no helping him into the podcast. There was no getting him comfortable. He was ready to jump right in, both feet right away. And I just thought it was riveting from start to finish.
Yeah. we keep talking about it if we want to. I think we just give it to them. Give it to the people.
Let's give it to the people. Assistant coach of the Minnesota Wild and NHL alum of over 385 games, Brett McLean. Time for the second period, and we're joined by an extremely special guest here today, former Iowa Wild assistant coach, current Minnesota Wild assistant coach, and a longtime NHLer. Brett McLean is with us here today. Mac, looking forward to this chat. We've been furrowing back through our archives, checking in with a lot of our mutual acquaintances to try to get some dirt on you. Unfortunately, haven't found a whole lot. Your friends are keeping you very tight to the chest, but this is going to be great, and we're looking forward to talking with you today, Brett. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, happy to be here, guys. And, let's have some fun.
So for starters, I want to get you reminiscing. I want to start way back in British Columbia, but first and foremost, if your hockey career was being made into a book, what do you think the title would be, or what would you like the title to be?
Probably Journeyman would be the title I'd go with. A lot of people might take that as a disrespectful term, journeyman for a hockey player, but I take it as a point of pride, being that I look at it that I had to kind of earn every day of my career. And yeah, I played a lot of places and played for a lot of teams, but I'm proud of every one of those spots I was at, and proud of all the different experiences that I was able to have and all the great people that I met. So that'd be what I would go with. And actually, interesting sidebar on that is after my first year playing in Colorado for the Avalanche, I went to arbitration, or was about to go to arbitration. And the way that process works is both teams put a legal brief together and present that to the arbitrator the night before, and then they go in and argue their case that next day. So we actually settled the night before on a contract, but we had already been given the other team's brief. Colorado had already given us their brief. We'd given them ours, and the front page, the cover sheet of their brief had the definition of journeyman. That's what it had on there. So that's why that name came to my mind.
I've always wondered this about the arbitration process, because it's got to be a little tricky, because you go in on one side and you're saying, hey, I deserve this much, and these are all the reasons why. But like, your employer then comes back and is like, yeah, well, these are the reasons why you don't deserve that much. So like, is that just a strange kind of concept to have to deal with that?
Yeah, it's a tense time, and especially myself, I'd only played 2 years in the NHL at the time, and was not a star by any stretch. I'd had a very good season, kind of overachieved that year, and I had very good comparables, but I didn't want to upset Colorado at all. So it was just one of those processes it's kind of like you have to use the tools at your disposal to try to get a contract, especially in a sport and in a job that your life is so short, right? The career is so short, in especially the National Hockey League, for players like myself. So you have to push to get a real good contract, but you don't want to make the other side.
Nobody wants to offend either side.
So that's why it was. If we had went, and by the time you get to the end of the process, you kind of know what you're going to get, because everything goes by comparables when you're a restricted free agent. So I had very good comparables, and so I knew I would get a little bit more in if we had actually went into the room and argued our sides. But I accepted their offer the night before. I'm very lucky that I had great representation that said, take this offer, because it's not worth getting the extra money and aggravating the other side. And you don't want to hear what they have to say, to be quite honest. The process is pretty brutal when you get in that room, because it's not the general manager or assistant general manager arguing it on their side. It is simply a lawyer that they've hired, and he is just going to cut you down. And so it was an interesting process, but I'm very happy how it worked out, and ended up having another very good season with Colorado the next year, and had a great relationship with management there.
Well, and to your point, arbitration after just 2 years in the NHL. Oftentimes you hear arbitration happening with players that maybe have a little more of a tenure behind them. So that had to be really nip and tuck in that negotiation. And obviously we're all happy to hear that it went the right way, not the wrong way. And here you are now. I want to turn the clocks back long before you had any idea what arbitration was to Comox, British Columbia, growing up on Vancouver Island. Paint the picture. You ask different players that have reached the levels that you've reached as the pinnacle of our sport in the National Hockey League, and everyone has different beginnings. Everyone has some similar beginnings. What was the picture like of Brett McLean growing up on Vancouver Island, dreaming of doing what you did and what you are doing now?
Yeah, well, I can't imagine a better place to grow up, to be honest, than where I grew up in. Royston is the little village, but Comox Valley is the area that I grew up in, and it's the sign when you drive into town as the recreation capital of Canada, and meaning that you can do everything there, and you can. From there's a ski hill 30 minutes away. It's arguably the best salmon fishing in the entire world. Every type of sport you can imagine, mountain biking, every outdoor activity. It's a amazing place. I grew up about 150 yards from the ocean, like just a wonderful place to grow up and really, really calm pace to living there. And so I had two older brothers and obviously my parents still live in the house that we grew up in. And so I was, being the youngest brother, was always trying to keep up with Sean and Kevin. And we had a kind of an old school carport, not basically a garage, but didn't have the front or back door actually. So we would, and our deck was above it. So we would play road hockey in there just for hours with the buddies from the neighborhood, and just so at the one side of the carport was the chimney. There was the bottom of the outside of the chimney, and on the other side there was a lip that there was more pavement that wasn't covered by the carport. So always remember the rules with slap shots. You could go in the one way, you had to take a slap shot behind the chimney, and when you're shooting the other way, you had to take a slap shot behind the lip. So that was always the arguments and stuff. So we had a half-acre yard, and so every sport you can imagine was played on that. My dad even made cut out a little golf hole so we could play golf, just everything, just with my brothers and my buddies, just playing every single sport. And that's one thing that I'm very thankful for, that I played basketball, did a lot of track and field, in school, played every sport, soccer, volleyball, all that with all my friends. And so really got exposed to different sports. Obviously hockey was a huge part of it, but on Vancouver Island, hockey's big, like it is everywhere in Canada, but not as big as it is in some other places, because there's so many other activities to do and so many other sports that people can do. So again, hockey was big, but I also in the winter played basketball, so I'd have to miss hockey games sometimes, things like that. But really thankful that my parents, we prioritized being multi-sport family, not just specializing in one sport. But then when I got 10, 11, 12, started to kind of separate myself in hockey, even though that's obviously a very young age. And then back then there wasn't hockey on TV all the time, right? So we're talking 30, 35 years ago. So
Saturday night was big, right?
Saturday night was big. Hockey in Canada, of course, like the Canucks games, which are obviously the big team there, their games were almost never on TV. We'd listen to them on the radio. Sometimes they'd be the late game, but usually the late game was whoever the Oilers were playing, right? So obviously watched a lot of that growing up. But one thing that I remember always being on TV was the Bantam National Championship. I believe it was called the Pure Cup back then, and what used to be called midget, I think it used to be called, now I think it's called under 18, the Air Canada Cup, their national championship. I believe that's what it was called back then. And there's a team called Notre Dame always in it. And now this is not Notre Dame, the university, obviously, this is a private school that was in Wilcox, Saskatchewan, still is in Wilcox, Saskatchewan, and people would come from all over to play at that school and go to school. A very high level of education they always seemed to be in the Canadian Championship game for those two tournaments, and that was some of the games that were on TV. And a player and a person that my family had watched grow up was from Campbell River, which is 30 minutes from where we're from. Rod Brindamore actually went to Notre Dame, so we had a little connection there. So long story long, I always wanted to go to Notre Dame because it was just this mythical place, this amazing. Rod Brindamore had gone there, and so when I was 14, 2 weeks after my 14th birthday, I went for grade 9 to Notre Dame to kind of start to pursue my dreams of hockey. And real good story connected to that was, think about how different the world was back then.
Yeah.
So my brother, Sean, oldest brother, he was going to university in McGill in Montreal. So for the first time I'd ever been on an airplane, 2 weeks after my 14th birthday, Sean and I, we get on our plane in Comox, we fly to Vancouver, then we fly to Calgary, then we fly and stop in Regina. Notre Dame is in Wilcox, which is about a 45-minute drive south. So we flew to Regina, stayed at the Travelodge Hotel. Still remember it, went to the Keg for dinner. Anybody who's been to the Keg in Canada knows, great steakhouse, good. That's an institution up north. The Keg Steakhouse. Then the next morning, he put me in a cab. I'd never been there, didn't know anyone. Put me in a taxi cab with some money. He flew on to Montreal. I went in a cab, 14 years old, to Wilcox. Had my hockey bag over one shoulder and had my some books, binders, stuff like that, and my clothes bag over the other shoulder, and my hockey sticks. And the cab dropped me off in the middle of the campus in front of the hockey rink in Wilcox, Saskatchewan. I didn't know where registration was anything. I walked to the rink. I ran into the team's equipment manager of the junior team there, and I asked him, and he pointed me in the right direction. So I have a 15-year-old daughter now, and I couldn't imagine doing that with her at this stage. But there's a different time, and I'm very thankful for that my parents trusted me to do that and paid for that, because it was very expensive, and that kind of led me, I guess, on my path to where I am today.
That might be the opening. That might be the prologue to the Journeyman. If you ever
Yeah.
write that,
There
that
you
might be
go.
the prologue
That's
right
pretty
there.
good.
I mean, that's what a tale. You're a stupendous podcast guest, because I wanted to talk about Notre Dame.
I'm
because
just watching him. We got all the questions right next to your face on
Okay.
the screen here, and you're
Just
taking
flow
us
right
right
into it.
through. It's great. I love
There
it.
you go.
and it's nice when we can save questions on our end. It's a lot better of a podcast when we hear more about you and not as much from us. So thanks for getting us there. I wanted to talk about Notre Dame because I think mythical is a great way to describe it, and especially for American hockey people, you have to sort of stumble upon it or really do your homework to know about Notre Dame. But I mean, it's a factory. I think people have compared it to Shattuck, and it might even be a little more legendary than Shattuck in some ways. Certainly in Canada it is. But I mean, names like you brought up Rod Brindamore, Wendell Clark, Curtis Joseph, Vinny LeCavalier, Brad Richards. You got John Cooper went there, Barry Trotz went there. I mean, the list goes on and on. When you got there and when you left, how do you think you changed from walking on there with your bag over your shoulder and talking to the equipment manager to the Brett McLean that went on to play in the WHL from there?
Yeah, it's so many ways. It's in why I tell that story that I just did is because it shaped me now to this day, no question. Just being able to move so much, being independent, I think being confident, being able to go into a situation or into a room where you don't know people and being able to adapt and have confidence. And so it is a massive part of my growth as a young man, and now going into a middle-aged man. It certainly played a huge role. So just to go back, you compared it to Shattuck, and I think for American hockey fans, it's a really good place to start, because the way I say it is Notre Dame was Shattuck before Shattuck. So it was there. It's been there for a long time. And I'm sure, I believe it was JP Parise that was very influential in starting Shattuck. I'm sure he borrowed a lot and used quite a bit of what they use in Wilcox. And really, now there's so many places like this, academies, they call them in Canada. I think there's over 30 now, but there was only one back then. It was the only one of its kind, and you had to apply and you had to write letters, and it really was a school of hard knocks. It's as flat as they come there. No exaggeration. The closest town away is 10 miles away. It's called Rollo, and you have to do, as part of your physical education class there, you have to do the Rollo run at the end of the year. And the bus takes you to Rollo, drops you off, and you have to run back to Wilcox, and it is 10 miles perfectly straight, perfectly flat. Oh, and so this is the type of place it is. You go there, and there's a mix of students there as well. I believe it was 400 students were there when I was at Notre Dame. 300 of them were there for academics or athletics. 100 of them were there more, they might have had some trouble in their past. So you get a really mix of kids there, and a lot of the discipline, a lot of the rules are enforced by the student body. So of course you have the leadership, but there's 4 different dorms, I believe, when I was there, and each dorm had a couple leaders, and they kind of enforced the rules. So it was very much an old school way of doing things, very Spartan setup. It was 4 to a room, two bunk beds. You've got a little locker for yourself, and so you really had to learn to take care of yourself, and really had to mature at a very young age. But then of course the athletics, specifically the hockey, is very, very high. So they had 5 Bantam teams and 7 under 18 teams when I was there, for the boys, and then for the girls, I think they had 2 of each. Not sure exactly on that. Very competitive to make the top team. So I was lucky enough to make the top team, the AAA team, my first year, Bantam, when I was there, and so that obviously helped to adjust. But the lessons I learned are just invaluable here moving forward. I can remember the first 2 months I was there, I called my parents every night with an old calling card. They gave me a calling card, and we had a payphone in our dorm, no cell phone, anything like that. So use the calling card, and I would cry every night asking them if I could come home. I was so homesick. And they said, sorry, it's already bought and paid for. You're not coming home. See you at Christmas. So I can imagine now as a parent how difficult that would have been on my parents to hear me crying. And it wasn't, everything was going fine there. It was just, you miss home, right? You miss the comforts of home, and you had to earn everything when you were there. It was very, very competitive, but you also, the bonds I formed with people there are just going to last for my entire life, and still talk to those people quite a bit that I went to Notre Dame with, and then the last part I add is the education is very good there. My parents are both teachers. So that was a big part of it. I had to keep really good grades, and you have to there. Like there was no, if your grades weren't at a certain level, you couldn't play sports. So when I went to then the WHL at 16, I was so much further ahead of the other 16, 17-year-old rookies in the Western Hockey League, just from a maturity standpoint, because I'd already lived away from home for 2 months. And so then when I got down to Tacoma, Washington, and I got to go to this beautiful billet's house, they were making us food every couple hours. I thought this was great. This was the best thing on earth, because I'd been living, like I said, this Spartan existence, sharing a room with 3 other boys my own age. So that's where it really kind of set me up for success as I moved into junior hockey, was because I'd already been through the homesick part. I'd already been through all of that, and I was much more prepared for the rigors of the Western Hockey League.
Oh, he's walked us into the WHL again. But before we get there, I have to ask: you finding numbers for AAA games in the 90s is difficult, but I found a number, and I want to know if you can corroborate this. 233 points in 71 AAA games at Notre Dame. Is that true?
I don't, obviously I didn't count every
Yeah,
one
I
of
didn't
them,
think that, but does that
I would
seem like a
say-
reasonable
I
number?
would
Because
say
that's
that
ridiculous.
That's
I
a
would
lot.
say that it probably is for a
Oh
couple
my
reasons.
gosh.
One, at Notre Dame, they actually do keep the stats properly. I mean, a lot of times they don't. People like there, they did, and we had a team manager that actually did keep and tabulate those. The other reason was our team was incredible that year, absolutely incredible. We had almost every player on the team went on to get a NCAA scholarship or play in the Western Hockey League.
Wow.
It was just our team. I think we only lost 3 games all season, and we only lost 1 game to a team our own age. We actually got kicked out of our league because we were beating everybody by too much, and we just had to tour around and go to tournaments. And so that would be the other reason, was because we did have a lot of lopsided scores, and I wasn't the only one on that team with those type of stats. There was quite a few of us, so it was a pretty fun season for our group. That's for sure.
God, I was looking at that, and doing my really simple, dumb math. I'm like sitting here, doing the numbers. I'm like, it's like 3-4 points a game.
It's a lot of points.
It's just ridiculous. I had to ask, because you never know when you get online and some of those older stats for younger players. But so thanks for corroborating that. The WHL, you broke in with Tacoma, the Rockets. They of course became the Kelowna Rockets. Sensational 5 seasons there, specifically 96-97. You're in the top 10 in scoring in the WHL, and it was 104 points, correct? I mean, just a ridiculously good season. What went right that year for you? Because you mentioned walking in and having the away from home time that had made you more ready for the opening season. That was not your opening season. That was maybe 2-3 years into your WHL career. What went right that year for Brett McLean?
Well, a lot, and it's so interesting how individuals always tied to team. Like that year I actually didn't have a great first half of the season, and I remember I was very disappointed in the first half of the season, and I think our team was as well. I remember we made a big trade, and it was like a 9-player trade. I think we got 4 players, we sent 5 players out, and we just brought in a couple real good veterans, and then I maybe that took, because I had become one of the leaders that year, maybe that took some pressure off of me to just go out and play, and just had a couple great line mates. Jason Delerme, who had an incredible, still a real good friend of mine today. He lives in Kelowna and was from Kelowna, so he obviously is a legend there. So he was on the right side, and Scott King was actually Dave King, legendary coach. It was his son, so he was the centerman, and then I actually played left wing that second half of the season, and we just took off and just had a great finish, and so did our team. And so that really helped. I think it was as a young man, as a teenager, right? Learning leadership is such a hard thing, right? I think that was a big part of it, is I'd become a leader on the team, and I maybe wasn't ready for it, and was putting too much pressure on myself. And then I think that trade and getting those veterans in just really kind of helped me to just go and play, and had a great, really solid finish to the season.
You also came across in your time with the Rockets a lanky defenseman by the name of Nolan Yankman. This is going to maybe be the hardest question that we asked you all podcast recording long. Do you have a favorite Nolan Yankman story that you would be willing to share with our podcast listeners? Of course, for those that aren't aware, the assistant coach coming into his second season now of the Iowa Wild.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's a few. I get a few on Yonks, but a real good one, I think, is so on those teams, we had some great characters. Obviously Yonks, you mentioned. Vern Fiddler is another
one of my favorite hockey names ever. Vernon Fiddler, one of my favorite hockey names.
Yeah, we were actually in junior. He didn't like his first name, so we started calling him Vinny. He wanted to be called Vinny, so that's what we called him all the time. But he went back to Vernon. But his parents would come for the summers to Kelowna right before training camp, and they'd bring a boat. So we'd go out on beautiful Lake Okanagan on this boat, and just to paint a picture of Nolan, he's very good with his money. Like, he really takes care of his money. I'll just leave it at that. So we go on the boat, and we're wakeboarding. We were wakeboarding at the time. We're wakeboarding a little bit. Having fun. Nolan, he wanted to do kneeboard which I don't know. I didn't even know that was a thing. So he kneeboarded behind that boat for a long time. Like we'd take, a 5-7 minute wakeboard. We're dragging him, and you can't knock him off, right? So we're dragging him around the lake or Fids is pulling him around there for half hour. I don't know what it is, but we're out there all day. We have a great day, and Yonks takes another rip. He goes out again, and he goes a couple times, and like that's burning gas, right? Like so, then we go to fill it up at the end of the day. And we didn't have a lot of money. Like nobody had a lot of money back then, right? Not that we have much now, but we're all throwing in like 20s and stuff, and he goes in his wallet. We see him; he's got like 20. Gives a 5. So we're just like, or to Fitz, we're like, come on, like he's been dragging around all day, and you pull out a 5, and like, oh, it was. So that's a real good Yonk story.
Thanks for sharing that. It's funny. He was one of the people I, of course, went to try to get some dirt on you. He wouldn't share anything. So I'm glad that you carved him one there, because now he'll be upset with himself that he maybe didn't try to throw a grenade back over the bow there.
I'm sure we'll get another one at some point.
When I said that, we don't have much money now, I think Yonks is the one that probably does have, because he is smart with his money. He's the one hockey player I know that is real smart with his money. So it's a dig, but it's also a bit of a compliment.
Sure. He did tell me that I should ask about Rusty's Bar and Grill.
Yeah, Rusty. So that's where it was myself, him, and Kevin Coral, and then a couple of years later, Bart Rushmer, another friend of ours that came and lived with us, and we had it was my house that we had in Kelowna, and we named it Rusty. I don't know, we named it Rusty's Bar and Grill, and we'd always think about us is that we had our fun as people in their early 20s do, right? We had our fun, but we always got up and worked and got our workouts in, and we were very strict with our rules. We had our workouts Monday to Saturday. We'd take Sunday off, but we'd only have our fun at night on Thursday night, Saturday night. Like we were very strict with that. And then in August we would almost completely like shut it down and get ourselves ready for training camp. But we had lots of great memories, lots of fun with those guys, and our crew is very, very close to this day. And I think where it started though, was Rusty's Bar and Grill, was that I'd already graduated out from the Rockets, but when they built the new arena there in Kelowna, they have the way it's set up for the Rockets locker room is the bottom level is the locker room, training tables, things like that, showers. The top level is all the gym. And there's just one door to get into the gym. So apparently what they do before games, when they do before their team stretch and stuff like that, is they crank the music up in the gym. And Nolan, he's a huge human. He grows every time I see him, right? 6'7". Apparently he would get like an earpiece put in his ear, and he would stand at the door and pretend to be a bouncer, and they'd have the music cranked up, and they'd call it Russ. So they'd have like a lineup outside the door, and he'd let like the guys into the gym. So I believe, you have to corroborate with him, I believe that's where the name Rusty's Bar and Grill actually came from.
That's unreal.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can absolutely see him doing that, without a doubt. And it's funny, you gave us a play-by-play there of exactly what Yonk said about Rusty's Bar and Grill being, you guys had fun, but he's like, you guys shut it down in August, you shut it down in September. He said almost verbatim what you said about that, which obviously plays into why you guys went on to have very successful careers post, for sure. To finish with Kelowna, you're someone there that when you look at some of the list of alumni, Leon Draisaitl, Duncan Keith, Shea Weber, Jamie Benn, you maybe don't have quite the mantle that they have behind them in their playing careers, but I was looking into more about the legacy you had in that place, and it's a pretty big legacy, Brett, and you won't agree to this because you're a humble guy, but you were put on, I believe, an all-time lineup there with these other players. I mean, Alex Edler's on that list, Jamie Benn's on that list, you're on that list. You're a very memorable player for that fan base up there. To leave a place that you spent so much time and to look back and know that you are valued the way that you are there, it has to hold a special place in your heart, I'd imagine.
No question. Very proud that I was and am Kelowna Rocket, and proud of Tacoma too. But no, it's obviously my family and my wife's from Kelowna too, so a lot of connections there. The Hampton family's been unbelievable to us over the years, and yeah, no, it means a great deal to me. And again, I've mentioned my kids a couple times already. When you start to get to middle age, you think about legacy and things like that, and it is kind of nice to have something like that to be a part of. And they've done a great job with the Rockets of making sure the alumni is very close, and we are very close, and so it is very very fun, and it's nice to just be a part of such a great franchise, because they've just done such a good job of not only building hockey players, but quality people, and they do put a huge priority on that. So yeah, just again, very thankful for that. So now that just leads me to a story just from your question. For a daughter that I mentioned that's 15, this was probably, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And so I was still playing in Europe. And when we'd come back from Europe, it would usually be early April, around there, mid-April. And the Rockets would still be in playoffs. So we'd always go to the Rockets games. Again, they treat us very well. The alumni, they'd get us tickets, and it was great. And so after the one game, we left the new building or newer building, Prospera Place, I believe it's called now, where the Rockets play. And we were driving home, and we drove by Memorial Arena, which is where I played for the Rockets. Much smaller venue. It's one of those old buildings. It was probably built like in the 1950s. The Queen is still hanging at the one end. Like it's an amazing building, like just beautiful old building. If you're a hockey guy, like
yeah,
obviously
I'd love to see this.
We are. And so we drive past the other, and my wife says to Darian, our daughter, she's like, Darian, that's where Daddy played when he played for the Rockets. She breaks out laughing, like dying. She's like, Daddy never played for the Rockets. Like, Darian had been with us, like when I was played in the NHL. She'd been with me when I played in the Spengler Cup. She'd been with us in Europe, where we played in front of big crowds. But like, no way I was good enough to play for the Rockets. Like they're up here. Daddy's not even close to that. So we always give her a hard time about that.
Well, she is the most responsible McLean, correct?
Exactly. That's what the Radio Joe O'Donnell says, that she's the most responsible McLean. So there's probably some truth in that.
You're drafted actually the year or the spring after your great WHL season. You go, I think it was 6th to last in the draft. Back when it was 9 rounds, there aren't even 9 rounds anymore, and I'm not trying to dig you. Obviously, you had the career that you had, but it's always interesting. I love asking this question to guys that, like yourself, that did have very, very great WHL, OHL careers, yet for some reason they wind up going late or not even going in the draft. What was the rub with you? Do you know what the rub was? Do you know why you maybe weren't going to be going earlier? And what was that day like for you, being someone who had really had a lot of success in a league that does promote to the NHL, obviously, very frequently, and then wind up being a late pick like that?
Yeah, well, I'd already been passed over the year before in the draft. So it was actually my second year of eligibility in the draft. And so, yeah, there was a lot of disappointment that first year. And then when I did get drafted, I was just ecstatic that somebody actually called my name. I didn't care when. And as far as the rub on me, it was a different time back then, in that, if you watch those games back at that time, like it was size was a premium. And I certainly didn't, not a big man. I wasn't big back then. So that was part of it. And I was never the fastest player either. I worked on my skating a ton. I was good in small areas, but I was not the fastest player. So not a great combination back then for your draft status, is not being that big and not being that fast. And even though that I did have success in the Western Hockey League. So I think that probably was a factor in it. As far as I know, but again, those times getting passed over, and those moments are what I'm thankful for those now, because those taught me perseverance and taught me. And then when I did make it to pro hockey, into the NHL, I took everything day by day, because I'd had to work so hard to get there. And so again, I'm very thankful for those times. But yeah, it was a great day for me when I got drafted by Dallas. I was very, very happy at that time.
More learning memory or more learning moments came from the following, I want to say, let's see, 4 years, 98 to 2002. Walk me through that time. You finished with the Brandon Wheat Kings after I'm imagining a deadline day trade to go to the playoffs in the WHL. Then you go Cincinnati in the AHL, Johnstown in the ECHL, and St. John in the AHL, Cleveland in the IHL, and then you finish with the Houston Aeros in the AHL before eventually going up and making your debut the following season with the Chicago Blackhawks. But, I mean, again, let's go back to the journeyman line. I mean, your suitcases almost had to be packed in perpetuity at that point.
Yeah, no, for sure. And just very lucky that I had a great agent. Art Breeze was his name. He passed couple years ago, but very, very thankful that I had him, because he just gave me great counsel. It was always, let's go somewhere to play. Like you need to go and play. It's not about getting a great contract or getting the most money. Not that I was getting a lot of money back then, but it's about getting you in a situation where you can play, because he believed in me. I'm very lucky that I had an agent that truly believed in me and truly cared about me. And so he really helped us kind of navigate those times, in that we didn't care where it was. It was just, let's go somewhere where the coach knows you and you can play. So after my WHL career ended, the end of that season, I had a couple opportunities to go and play either in the American Hockey League or the ECHL. So I chose Cincinnati in the American Hockey League and went there and got some experience. And the reason why I went there is because they had a really thin roster. They didn't have a lot of players. So I got a chance to play, I think it was 7 games, and got some real good ice time. So great experience playing against men. And then in that summer, I signed an American Hockey League ECHL 2-way contract with St. John Flames, which was Calgary's farm team. And again, for the same reason, at the time, they didn't have a lot of players. They were kind of a thin organization. So Art and I thought that was the best chance for me to play and to get a chance to play in the American Hockey League. So I went and had a really good camp and just was real focused, and then made St. John, the American League team, out of training camp. They had a couple guys that had NHL contracts that I had outplayed. And so interesting, this story was Rick Vibe was their coach. I think he was first Maple Leaf to score 50 goals. I loved him as a coach, just honest guy, and played the guys that had earned their spot. So I was playing ahead. I think it was the first 6 games of the season. I was playing ahead of some guys that had NHL contracts, which is hard, right? Like, they've been invested in by the big club. He called me to his office. He said, "We got to send you down to Johnstown in the ECHL, but we're trying to find these other guys an opportunity to play somewhere else. And if we do, you're coming right back up." And I think about it now, how many guys are told that line, and not the teams aren't trying to do, it's hard to find spots for players. There's a lot of good players out there. Well, it actually happened. 3 weeks later, they were able to find those guys other spots, and I got called up and got to play the rest of the season in the American Hockey League, and kind of played like a third line checker role. And so learn how to play pro hockey and check and kill penalties and do those things, and got a ton of ice time. It was just a really positive season for myself. And then after that year, how things go, everybody in the entire Calgary organization and St. John organization got fired. Everybody. So at the end of the year,
fire sale, pun intended.
We're talking about signing me to an NHL contract. Everybody got fired. And so started back from square one. And the July 1st, the Minnesota Wild called and offered me a 2-year contract. They were a new franchise, offered me a 2-year contract. And then, so obviously was very excited about that. And the first year, so I was first ever wild development camp, first ever wild training camp. It's funny how things come around full circle,
No
right?
kidding.
And isn't that interesting? And then, so the first year, the minor league team was in Cleveland, which was the last year of the IHL. How defunct IHL were the Cleveland Lumberjacks, and played there that season for Todd McLellan. Obviously, we all know that name. All hockey fans know that name. Played for him. That after that season, the IHL folded. Next, then they moved the affiliation to Houston. Played in Houston for Todd. Once again, we had a great season that year. Made it to the conference finals. Lost to the Chicago Wolves, who ended up winning the Calder Cup that year. So that's kind of how that played out. And then after that season, I think Minnesota just wanted to sign me to just a American Hockey League contract. So then I signed a 2-year contract with the Chicago Blackhawks after that.
And from there, 385 NHL games behind you. You brought it up a little bit when you were talking about, again, more steps in your great journey. Boy, I need a lot more time with you, Brett, to really properly pick your brain on some of this stuff. I'd love to. But I hear this all the time when talking with players that have done the grind of minors and have broken through to the National Hockey League. Everyone finds a way to be something for a franchise. You find a niche, because most people that get into the American Hockey League or the IHL in those days, they've scored at one point.
Yeah.
But only the very select few can score in the National Hockey League.
Yeah.
And to your credit, though, you had some seasons, 36, 40 points here and there. So it's not like you didn't score when you got up there. But what do you think the role that it was that you found where was there an aha moment where you went, this is what I have to do to stay here, and then you chased that down?
Yeah, well, I think for me, again, and I talked about it a bit, was just because of my journey, my game was so rounded that I could literally play on any line and in any role because I'd done it. At some point in pro hockey, I had done it. So then my first year in Chicago, my first year with Chicago in Norfolk, I was kind of the offensive guy. I had a really good year. I hadn't had that in pro yet. So I got to do that as well and add that to what I'd done, a mostly penalty killing kind of third line checking role up into that point, second unit power play, things like that. So I was so prepared to do any role. So, and I think that's kind of why I did end up sticking for those 385 games was because I wasn't good enough to be a top 6 forward. I wasn't big enough to kind of be and physical enough to be like a real bruising player and a real, play that role, but I was able to kind of fill in the gap and plug those holes for a roster. And I can remember one of my coaches in the NHL, he said to me at my year-end meeting, he said, what I loved about you and kind of what your identity is now is you start the season on the 4th line and you end it on the 2nd. And that's kind of what I did every year, my NHL career, until my last year in Florida when I didn't do that, and I was out of the league. But that's how quick it goes. But that's kind of why, and I think it was, and I also, one thing I say about my career is some people are ready to play in the NHL at 19. Some people are ready to play in the NHL at 21. I wasn't ready to play in the NHL until I was 24. And that's just the way it is. And I'm lucky enough that I was still on Chicago's radar to play, because a lot of times by the time you're 24, when you've started pro at 20, they've kind of moved on to other people. I was lucky enough that I was still on their radar and they still gave me a chance. And the other thing that happened really well for me that kind of came around was I mentioned earlier how everybody in Calgary had got let go after my season in St. John. Well, the head coach in Calgary at that time that had got let go was Brian Sutter. So now, a few years later, he's head coach in Chicago. So I come into Chicago, I have a great training camp my first year. I get sent down to Norfolk, still have a real solid, our whole team had a great year. And we won our division. And then I come back again, have a great training camp. When I do get my chance with the Blackhawks, Brian Sutter's the coach, and he's now known me or been familiar with me for a bunch of years. And he had a lot of trust in me. So right from my first game, I was taking diesel and faceoffs and killing penalties right from my first game. There was no easing into it. So that was kind of, you said, an aha moment. I know that's not exactly what you're talking about. That was probably the bounce the break that I needed. So I got a lot of ice time right from the start, and then you gain confidence. So you need an opportunity, and you got to have confidence while you are in that opportunity, which is a very tough thing to do when you're stepping into the National Hockey League. So I think Brian gave me that confidence when I did get the opportunity.
Well, we've gone 45 minutes without me really allowing Joey to ask a question. All we've proven is I'm a gigantic hockey nerd, and I could sit here and do this for another 3 hours. So we do want to get to the coaching side, and I know, Joey, you have more questions on the coaching side. To get us there, that last line you just said about getting the opportunity and taking the opportunity, have you had that conversation with now being on the coaching side? Have you almost said those exact words to players being in the role that you're in now?
Yeah, no question. Quit. Lots of times. I think I got one guy in Iowa. Everyone's familiar with him, Jerry Mayhew, right? Like I was with him his first year when I was my first year coaching, and I had that exact conversation with him when he got his chance to get into the lineup. Was now you've got to take your opportunity, and obviously he did, and he's carved himself out a very career that he should be very proud of, and he's still got lots of great things left to do. So that's just one example, and not to take away again from Joe's question. I don't know what he's going to ask, but I use, again, I'm so thankful for my journeyman playing career, because that helps me so much as a coach, because I have honestly been through every single scenario that these players have been through. I've been called up, I've been sent down, I've been healthy scratched, I've been on the first line, I've been on the fourth line. Obviously, the only players I can't really say that I've been in their shoes are the superstars, right? I can't. I don't know what it's like to be Kirill, obviously. So that's the only one. But most of the others, I've been in that situation, and so that helps me so much, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, I've obviously got questions, but I just enjoy just sitting back and kind of listening to the whole thing. And obviously, we've got a ton more that we can go through that we probably even scratched the surface.
Well, I was gonna say I'd love to delve into Europe, but let's move into coaching.
I think I almost think Europe is like its own separate thing. Although I do have just a question about. I mean, you over the course of your career, 7 different leagues, 5 different countries. Aside from playing in the United States and in Canada, is there a spot that for you was just like your favorite place to play in when you were in Europe? Is there a spot that just kind of blew you away?
Yeah, well, very lucky. Everywhere I played, I loved. That includes everywhere. Johnstown was great. I mean, that's the real life Charlestown, right? Like that's the Chiefs. Yep. Like we played in that ring. I mean, I have great memories from the 3 weeks I spent there. But in Europe was fantastic. Just really lucky. Loved my time in Sweden. That was after my first year in the NHL. I had to play. I had to go somewhere and play. I couldn't not play. So, and such a good league. It just opened my eyes to how many great players are out there that we've never heard about. Sometimes we get in this bubble in Canada and in the US where we think everything is the NHL or the AHL or ECHL or college or junior, but there's so many great players and that was such a humbling experience that year in Sweden. Loved my time in Switzerland. Just Bern was fantastic. Winning the championship there, it was a memory I'll have forever. They get 17,000 fans each game there in Bern, and 11,000 of them are standing and singing the entire game. Just incredible. And we won it at home in Game 7. Great memories there. Lugano is probably the nicest place to play hockey outside of the National Hockey League. We had palm trees in our yard. It's 20 minutes from Lake Como. It's just absolutely gorgeous and a great fan base, and had so many. The memories we made there, the 4 years was just fantastic, and then ended up in Linz, Austria, which is another place that just kind of blew us away. Kind of a diamond in the rough type of place. 5,000 fans. They pack into this building that you might, because of fire code, you might allow 2,000 here in the U.S. Just jammed, and again singing the entire time, and had so many great memories. And the thing is, the friendships we made over there was just. Now the head coach of Linz, Phil Lucas, was our captain when I was there, and so we still talk once a week, Phil and I. So just those connections and those experiences, especially for my family. Our daughter, she was speaking Italian by the time we left Lugano fluently. Like she would go to school and just have no issues. And then our oldest son, Nixon, he was speaking German by the time we left Austria. So those experiences just shaped our family. And so to answer your question, all of them. We just had a fantastic experience everywhere we were.
So you said the kids were fluent in the languages. Are you fluent in any of those languages, or is it just something they picked up? And
I can order in a restaurant, and I can order a beer, and that's about it.
The important things.
My excuse was I was always like, I was always on year-to-year contracts. So that was always the excuse. I wasn't going to learn the language. I didn't know I'd be back next year. That was my excuse. But no, it's the kids. They just it's unbelievable how quickly they can pick up stuff and how quickly they adapt. They're much more adaptable than us parents are. That's for sure.
Those European games, have you seen videos of like the fanfare and like the light shows? And I know in Germany they're like thundering drums.
It's like watching soccer games.
It's incredible.
It's crazy.
I got to go. I went to a game in Austria, actually going over when I was younger to see a mutual friend of ours, Darby Hendrickson, who we don't need to talk about, right? Well, we can move right past him now. He was playing for Red Bull Salzburg, and we went to actually the league championship game, and it was nuts. It was incredible. I'm a 15-year-old. I think there was an entire section of topless people. That was in one corner. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, the Zamboni had a stripper pole on it too. It was unlike anything. I'm 15 years old. It was just like sensory overload everywhere. It was incredible. The game itself was incredible too. Not just the fact that there were topless people in the section top right.
We tried to do not to that degree. We tried to do something similar in San Jose. We brought like there's a MLS soccer team out there, and we brought like their big fan support group. We tried to get them to come out with drums and everything and have it like be this electric atmosphere, and people hated it. They couldn't stand it. They just wanted to watch the game and not have all the distractions and all that kind of stuff. So it definitely only works in Europe. I don't think that would work here.
It's so different. Yeah. Coaching wise, when you walked into it, what surprised you? What did you go, I didn't know that this would be a part of being an assistant coach at any level, let alone the American Hockey level where you started with the Iowa Wild?
Yeah, the thing that surprised me the most is how good the players are with feedback. And so I thought one of the biggest challenges of the job would be you're meeting with a player and you're showing a video on things they're not doing the way you'd like them to do it, and maybe they get defensive or wouldn't like that, and I was blown away with it. Was just the opposite. Like that was the best part of the job, and that giving them constructive criticism, stuff like that. The players wanted that, so I think it's really a credit to the Wild and the quality young men they bring in. It's also just kind of the way the newer generation, they're so good at, again, accepting feedback. They're so good at going through information quickly and using it. I think it's really interesting in dealing with that. And you think about the way 20-somethings, the way they communicate and the way they're just able to go on their phones and get so much information and decipher it and then learn how to use it or to communicate with each other is really fascinating. So that's what I really enjoy the most about the job is, again, I thought that it would be, I'd come in to talk to a player and they'd be diving into those stalls behind you guys, trying to hide. It's just the opposite. Like now I come into the locker room and players are always like, hey, do you have something for me? Like what can I work on? Things like that. So that was a really, really pleasant surprise. Might have been because back when I played, all those stories we told, all those places I played, if the coach was coming to talk to me, that meant, only one of two things. One, you might be getting sat out, or two, you're getting sent down. So maybe that's why I had a little different perspective. But
so you were hiding in the stall. You were hiding in the stall.
That guy.
Literally hiding. Because I knew there's only, you talk to the coach at the end of the season, you're in, and that was it. If you're talking to him any other time, it wasn't for a good thing. So, so that's probably why I had a different perspective on it. But that's been just something I just love about the job is that the daily working with the players and just trying to help them get better. And they're all so great at taking that feedback and using it.
One thing that stands out to me about you, and this is not a knock to other assistant coaches that have been with the Iowa Wild, but I've heard it about you, and I know this about you. You were really entrenched in Des Moines, and you got out into the community. You got to know people. I believe you helped coach maybe a couple of your son's teams at one point. What was it about Des Moines that really hooked you? Because you've been to so many of these different places, towns. You bring up Lugano and the beautiful areas you've lived. Yet I know Des Moines holds a special place in your heart. What about Des Moines hooked the McLean family?
Wow, that's easy. The people, right? Iowa Nice it's a real thing, and and we can attest to it because you just said we've lived literally all over the world, and the people in Des Moines and Iowa are just fantastic. And we just, right from day one, we just loved it and still love it. Try to get back there as much as we can. And we have so many great friends that we talk to all the time and come and visit us, which is really, really nice. Yeah, so it was easy for us. We just, we're obviously very, very social people. And we talked about it that I think because we've lived so many places, our ability to adapt is quite strong. And so that's one thing when we went to Europe too, we said as a family, like, we're not just going to stay in our apartment and not meet people and just be friends with the people from North America. We're going to make sure we make friendships with people from Switzerland or Austria. And we did that. So it didn't change when we went to Iowa. And yeah, we were very happy to stay in Iowa for a long time and call that home. Obviously, Minnesota called, and that was an opportunity we couldn't pass up, and we're loving it here too. But the people in Des Moines are just fantastic. What we really loved about it was that a few things people prioritize in Des Moines, and that is, obviously being good to each other and being friendly. They prioritize their schools. School system is just unbelievable, right? And they really prioritize, for us, youth sports and dance and things like that, activities. That's kind of people's priorities there, and that obviously aligns with our families as well. So it made it a very easy place for us to like.
What were some when you spent your time in Des Moines? What are some spots that you'd go hit your favorite restaurants to go to? Was there a place if you needed to unwind after a road trip or a long homestay, you need to grab a drink or two? Is there a watering hole you frequented? Like what were your go-to spots?
Yeah, well, favorite restaurant was actually Wasabi, the sushi place,
yeah.
And we loved it. The one out in Waukee, because that's where we first lived when we were there. We just loved that spot. So that was our favorite one. And like, again, all the places we've lived, would you think that the best sushi, our favorite sushi spot of all the places we lived was in Waukee, Iowa?
And I tell people that I tell that to my family because I'm from Massachusetts, so East Coast, it's easy to get. Obviously, when you're on the coast, it's easy to get fresh seafood. And I've told them there's some good sushi spots out here, and they laugh. They don't think it's possible, but it's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of real good spots here.
Yeah, so it's good. High Life Lounge. I mean, it is just absolutely love that place. So, I love the shag carpet and the ponies. So
the mini
Miller
High Life.
So that's where we'd go to with our staff a lot. I remember when we made the playoffs, and then when we won our play, that's where we would go as a staff. Actually, I think the entire Iowa Wild organization was there, which is some really cool memories we had at High Life.
That moment,
these are a couple spots.
The playoffs. Could you feel what that meant to the entire organization, the fans, everybody that had been there? Did you feel that even though you were still relatively new into the organization?
Yeah, I believe it was my second year. I believe it was year 7 or 6 of the organization. I think year 6. And it was so, and that was what was so cool about High Life Lounge is that honestly, everyone from the organization came there. Every single person, ticketing, everything. It was, and the people like Tuna, like Joe, that had been with the organization, Lisa from ticketing, I believe, that had been with the organization since day one, moving here. Like, it meant so much to them, the work they had put in and what they'd seen and what they'd built here. And the Iowa Wild there's a reason why that the Iowa Wild wins so many community awards from the American Hockey League, because the work that everyone has done in the community is just first class. And the Iowa Wild has such a great reputation in the city of Des Moines. And that's really a credit to all those people that maybe you don't see on the ice. And so that's what was so special about that, was that sharing that with them was really fun. And then again, a couple weeks later, when we knocked out Milwaukee in the first round, and I still watched Radio Joe's call there once in a while. It's just such a good call when we ended up winning Game 5 there in Milwaukee, and yeah, it was a special moment to be a part of because it meant so much more than just the on ice product.
They call that in my profession capturing the moment, and you nailed it. Joe nailed it in that moment in a big way. I only got one more question for you, Brett. Do you want to get to anything else before we wrap with Mr. McLean?
My last one would have been the typical question we usually lead off with.
Oh, we
question.
totally forgot
you just
about
blew
that.
Right past that. So that would be my only one. But
Ooh,
if you want to
yeah,
take
great
it,
point. No. Yeah, go for it.
so normally how we kick things off in this podcast
dang
when
it.
people are on top of things.
Yeah, when I'm not.
It's it's the Ridin the Bus podcast. So the whole point is we want to have conversations if you're sitting next to someone on the bus, right? So do you have any good bus stories or bus etiquette that you might be able to share with the group, with the listeners, or even now it's more of are there any charter etiquette kind of scenarios that you've got for everybody?
Yeah, well, I spent a lot of time on the bus, that's for sure. If I could think of just one, actually, I got a good one. Not etiquette, but I don't mind. I'm going to carve it. I'm going to carve someone here, which will be fun. And obviously, he's done very well for himself, so we can take him down a notch. Derek Lalonde, head coach of the Detroit Red Wings. Obviously, congrats to him. A real good friend. We talked yesterday. He's very much deserving of where he is. It's a testament to being good at what you do and being good to people. And he's won 2 Stanley Cups now and earned his way an NHL head coaching job. And I wish him all the best. But I think it was my first year. Yeah, it must have been my first year because that was the only year that I coached with him. Was he had hurt his knee in the summer. Okay, he'd blown his ACL, I think, in the summer and had surgery. And it was 3-4 months after, and he's still just nursing it, and he's icing it all the time. And we're on the bus, and I'm not sure where we're coming from. And the sleeper bus has 3 bunks on each side for the Iowa Wild. Ben, I know you've been on it; you're familiar with it. So you always put on the top bunk, you put all of the pillows, blankets, bags, stuff like that. And then the middle bunk kind of folds down almost like a futon, and then you kind of sit on almost like you have a couch. So you sit there, and usually there's 2 or 3 across sitting there. So I think it was Derek and I sitting on the one that were just 2 of us there. And so bus is rattling around, and I think we're working on our computers, and then something falls off the top bunk and hits Derek in the knee, and he squeals. Like I'm talking squeals. Like he was dying, you know. And we look on the ground, it was a pillow. It was a pillow that had hit him in the knee. And so you can ask Tuna, our old equipment manager is now Phil, you can ask Joe, you can ask Keith Paulson. This is a legendary story about Newsy in that he got hit in the knee with a pillow and he squealed pretty loud. So that's a story from the Iowa Wild.
Oh, that is a fantastic story, and no better way to button the podcast than with that. That's definitely going to be one of our pre-show highlights we put out before this podcast goes live. I would think so. That's a bang-on story. Mac, this has been just outstanding. You, as I knew you would be, some fantastic stories and just some great back-and-forth banter. Thanks so much for coming on. And obviously, like I said, we could have talked Europe. We could have talked Minnesota Wild. We could have obviously delved more into the Iowa Wild. But just thanks so much, and best of luck this season. Obviously, we'll be watching very diligently down here in Des Moines.
Thanks, guys. Let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely.
A major thanks to Brett McLean as well as Aaron Sickman, PR guy for the Minnesota Wild, for lining that up for us. We don't need to say anything more about it.
Award-winning PR guy,
That's
too.
True.
Multiple
times. Yep. Also, we should shout out congratulations to Megan Kogut, since we're talking about the PR side. She'll be going to Philadelphia to work in another award-winning PR department in Philadelphia. So congratulations to her. But yes, nice shout out to Sicky and Megan there. And obviously Brett was fantastic, as we talked about at the beginning of the show. We don't need to keep knocking down that door now. We can just move on. But thanks again to Brett, and a great chat with Brett. 10-year tidbit time, and you're giving us the read this week.
Yeah.
Take it away.
10-year tidbits presented by Explore Minnesota. Wineries, breweries, distilleries, and cideries are all cropping up all over the state. And you're invited to come and taste the delicious results. Whether you're looking to follow the Southern Minnesota Beer Trail or want to discover a new winery up north, Min Sip's Passport lets you I gotta start that over.
I kind of want to leave this in.
I gotta start that over. I feel like I can't read. We can leave this in. I feel like I can't read. I'm gonna start this over from the top. This was in my head.
No edit, Marquise.
No edit. In my head, I was going somewhere with it, and it just.
You were trying to ad-lib a little bit.
Yeah, I was. I was trying to have some fun with it.
Spice it up.
I wanted this one.
Spice it up like a nice spiced cider at one of those cideries.
Yeah. All right, let's try this again. Wineries, breweries, distilleries, and cideries are cropping up all over the state, and you're invited to come taste the delicious results. Whether you're looking to follow the Southern Minnesota Beer Trail or want to discover a new winery up north, let the Min Sips Passport give you inspiration to quench your thirst. Visit exploreminnesota.com/mnsips for more information.
Bravo.
I nailed that one.
Bravo.
That was
You
easy.
did.
Second
You
time's a
did.
charm. Everybody's better the second time around. It's like when you're playing golf and you take those provisional, breakfast ball shots. Golf is such an easy sport when you hit it the second time.
Or when you miss your putt and then you pull it back and then you make
Yeah,
it every
yeah.
time. It's
It's-
almost a guarantee you're going to make it.
Golf's
on
the
the
easiest
second
sport
try.
when you play it. When you take two shots. So
I'm looking at it. Min Sips Passport. Yeah, that's a little bit of a tongue twister.
you know what got and it's pathetic. But nobody can see this. Ben can see it. What got me is the dash threw me off on inspiration. And just because I was in such a rhythm, and I was like, wait, and then I lost my.
It did go off the rails fast. You were sounding really fluid. It was good, and then I can see that the dash.
Let's give me more ad reads. Let's do it.
All right.
This is fun.
Okay.
I enjoyed it. All right.
Asking you shall receive.
Anyways.
Yes. What is the tidbit?
Tidbits. I've actually got two.
Okay.
We only thought we had one. I got two because I thought of one as.
I don't know what the second
I
one is.
also thought
This
of
could
one
be
as I
anything.
was reading, which probably didn't help. But all right. So the first one, for our season ticket holders and our fans, people who know our front office staff pretty well, we will have a new community coordinator joining us as of today. When you hear this, on the day after the long Labor Day weekend, Joe Picardi will be joining us. He actually comes down from Minnesota, spent some time with the Wild up there, so someone who's familiar with the organization. But we're very excited to get him here and get him up and running, because obviously community is such a huge part of our organization, top to bottom, but really here in Iowa.
Brett McLean talked about it.
Yeah, it's huge. So
everybody knows.
we're excited to get him up to speed, get him involved with everybody, and get him face to face with a lot of people, throughout the course of the year and years to come. So very excited about that. The second tidbit, and I can't give too much information, but obviously we've already rolled out our promo schedule. There's probably going to be another small promo schedule rollout. We got a couple additional themes, a couple updates that we're going to want to send out and roll out. Don't know exactly when that's happening, but there's probably some exciting ones for people that I think they're going to enjoy. So that's something to keep an eye out for in the coming weeks. And I've actually got a third, because by the time you hear this, it's going to be an official thing. We have a game change.
Yes.
For January 21st. That game was originally supposed to be played at 12 o'clock. It is now being played at 6 o'clock. So it gives you some more time to enjoy your afternoon and then come on out and enjoy the Wild game that night.
And allows me more time to get ready for the game.
To prep.
So
Yep.
I'd much
After
rather
playing the night before.
I'd much rather go from having the game at noon and changing it to 6 than vice versa. Than it was at 6 and now all of a sudden we're playing at noon.
Yep.
The people behind the scenes will appreciate that.
Look at that magic. We just went from we only got one tidbit to now having three.
Voila.
Come on.
Is Des Moines, Iowa Mega Bowl night going to be a thing on that additional layout? I'm still going to keep throwing it your way. Jackie Moon.
I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be Jackie Moon night, but it is still going to be that beach theme night.
Merger. Merger. Jackie Moon.
That
NBA.
Yeah, that let's get tropical
I'm not
night.
going to
It's
let it
just
die.
just a placeholder name for what our ideas are. We're still waiting on a couple things on that. I'm hoping that game's included in this next rollout. But yeah, I still think you should dress.
My
as
goal is
Dick
to bring it
Pepperfield.
up enough on the podcast between now and the date that a few people show up in like Flint Tropics gear.
Yeah, and you know what's
And
get
get confused by it.
what's going to help your
I'm
cause?
submarining the marketing team on this attempt, but it's one of those things. If I say it enough, put it out into the world, maybe it'll come true.
fruition. Yeah, what's probably going to help your cause too is our new media relations manager, Alec Lesner. He is a huge semi-pro fan he's quoting it upstairs in our marketing
Good.
office quite a bit. So
I knew I liked him
he's
right
just
off the
kind of
hop.
subliminally
Knew he was a good
helping
hire.
throw that our way. So yeah,
Smart guy.
Yep.
Media department, same wavelength.
Yep, that's good.
So the end of summer, sadly, but also it means really the beginning of hockey season
Yeah.
being here, which for us is very exciting. Labor Day is, I don't know if it's the official end of summer, but
It's not.
to me it feels like,
Yeah.
okay, we moved into fall now. Granted, it'll still be 1 billion degrees in Des Moines in
Mhm.
September, and I'll want to go run as close to a body of water as I possibly can every time I leave the front door of my house, which
Yeah.
is one of my only qualms with Des Moines is the heat here in the summer, but it does play off in the winter compared to Minnesota, where the winters are much more temperate here than they are in Minnesota. Not that I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes talking about weather,
Yeah.
but we did want to talk just some highlights from the summer, finish up our podcast here, a little run through some of our favorite memories of the summer that was 2022.
Yeah, and it's I think the official end of summer is like September 21st or something. Although we had a big
It
Alec,
seems so late.
and John Savoya, one of our corporate partnership, someone on the corporate partnership. Can't get the marbles out of my mouth. I can't
Ooh.
talk. It is what it is. But John Savoya, me and Alec Lesnar were having this conversation yesterday, and John was like, "Oh yeah, it's officially the end of summer." Me and Alec were like, "No, it's not till September 21st." He's like, "Yeah, well, meteorologically or
Meteorologists?
yeah, no, but like yeah."
Meteorologically?
Yeah, that's what
I don't know if
is
that's
that
a
what I
word,
said?
Joey.
I don't know. That's what he said. I don't think it's a word either. But he's like, yeah, that's like in that way, it's the end of summer because it starts to get a little bit cooler. And me and Alec both looked at each other. We were like, it's gonna be like 90 degrees
Yeah, it
all
doesn't
weekend. It's
get
about
any
to spike
cooler.
again. So, but yeah, not really the official end of summer, but for all intents and purposes, it basically is because after Labor Day, you're right into rookie camps and training camp, and then before you know it, it's October 14th, and we're dropping the puck on our 10th season. So, but yeah, and looking back on the summer, I think for me, first full summer being able to be here in Des Moines, so being able to just experience what that's been like, and my biggest takeaway is really just taking the time to truly decompress. I feel like it was the first time in coming up on 10 years working in sports where I've had an off season where I can actually treat it like an off season, and that's a credit to having an awesome support team in the marketing department and being able to really not have to be worried about getting everything done and doing everything by myself, having the help
You
to
can
do that has
delegate
been-
a little
yeah,
bit.
it's-
Yep.
But so that's been a big thing. But I've had some time to be able to travel and do some things, and I'm at that early 30s age where my friends are all getting married. So I got a couple friends who got married a couple weeks ago. I got another wedding at the end of the month that I'm actually officiating, which I'm really excited about, back out in California. So just kind of being able to share those big moments with some of your close friends is always an exciting thing to do. And then this coming weekend, I'm actually heading out to Chicago. Real quick trip. Going to go to a Cubs game, see my cousin, come back, and I'll be planted firmly on my couch for the start of football, NFL football on the 11th.
Vikings
which
Packers on
I
Sunday.
can't wait. Patriots Dolphins, can't beat it.
I feel much better about your Patriots than I do about my Vikings.
Do you? I wouldn't. I think the Patriots are going to struggle.
It's just more of a lifetime of despair being a Vikings fan
Yeah, I
that you just
guess.
come into the season and you just
I don't know. I started fantasy
just
football
ass-
drafts
yeah.
this past week. That's been a whole thing, and just yeah. I'm in too many fantasy football leagues. But
Can you give me a small sample size of what your preparation towards being an officiant at a wedding looks like? How are you
Yeah.
preparing for that?
yeah, that's actually been that's a lot of fun. So I've done it once before. I did my cousin's wedding last year.
I knew you were doing this one. I didn't know you'd done it before.
Yeah, so last
Oh,
year I
you're
did.
seasoned. at
Yeah,
this
so I
point.
did my cousin's wedding, and honestly, I didn't really know what to do.
Hi,
I
I'm Joey.
didn't know how
and
it
These two
worked.
right here are getting married.
Yeah, like I didn't know how it worked.
Hi.
You have to get ordained, right? So
Yeah.
everybody always jokes, oh, you can just get ordained online. You can, and that's what I did. I went to the Universal Life Church, and which is I think it's a pretty common like online ordination website. So I went on and filled everything out. I forget how much it cost, but you basically answer a couple questions, click a couple buttons, and they give you everything you need. And it's pretty much good for like any state. Each state has their own wedding laws and things like that, so you just gotta kind of go through and see what those are. So the one I did last year was North Carolina. The one I'm doing in a couple weeks is California. So a couple different rules here and there. Make sure you get all the right paperwork if the county needs it. Once you have all that, it's the planning side of things and how it's gonna work. So how I do it may not be how everybody does it, but obviously it's not my show. It's the people getting married. It's their show.
Well done.
It's what they want, and how they want it to work. So I try to set up like a sit down, a get together or something. Obviously, I'm doing it over Zoom because I'm not in North Carolina or California, but set up a meeting with them to kind of talk about what their expectations are. How long do you want it to be? What are the things you absolutely want to have? What do you not want to have? Like, give me all that stuff, and then with that, I'll start piecing together what the script is going to look like, I guess, because I'm sitting up there with a book, reading it all, which was, when I did my cousin's wedding, it was like, I got no problem getting up and talking in front of people. I mean, you saw it at the state fair. Not a fear of mine. Public speaking, no issue. But standing up there with the book in front of like family, people I know I should be comfortable with, is shaking.
Really?
Nonstop. Yeah, because I don't know why. I think it was just because like it's such like an important thing.
Yeah, it's huge.
Like you can't screw that up, and you don't want to screw up their special day. So like that was like super nerve wracking. I get emotional with weddings too. Like it's an
I
emotional
bawled
thing.
like
and
a child at mine.
I don't like bawl, but like I get teary eyed and all that kind of stuff. So I remember they both, my cousin, his wife, or his now wife, they both walked down the aisle. They're standing up there, and she's crying. He's tearing up. I'm tearing up. And before we even started, I kind of just looked at them both. I was like, all right, we're gonna take a deep breath, right? I was like,
Get together here, people. Come on.
Take a deep breath, and I was like, oh, all right. I was like, that definitely wasn't just for me. Like it was for you guys more importantly. But so I have that initial meeting, write the whole script down, and then meet with them again, kind of run through a bulk of the script. I like to give the bride and groom homework as I'm writing it. It's just like, hey, my thing is like, tell me, send them a couple questions. Like, tell me what love means to you, what marriage means to you, what's been important in the relationship, blah, 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 and get those answers from each of them. So that way, when I'm doing the ceremony, I can talk about what they each told me. Like, I mean, I know them, but like what they each told me about their relationship. So it's that little personal touch that I like to include too. But yeah, because it's
pretty
like
exhaustive. You've come prepared.
But hey, it's I mean, we're talking like 20 minutes, so it does happen quick. But it's fun, exciting, and like I said, it's about them. As long as they are happy with what the ceremony looks like, that's great. And it's not about me. I do like to have fun with it, and it's not a roast. I'm not up there to make it a roast. You know what I mean? But I'm gonna make some jokes here and there and have some fun with it. But because it's as much as it is for them, it's their ceremony. I've been to weddings where you're sitting in the crowd and you're like, dozing off and falling asleep, and you don't want
Twiddling
that.
your fingers. Well, if you're listening and you are engaged, soon to be engaged, don't like your local pastor,
I'm available.
Here he is.
Just reach out and we can chat. We can have a chat. Everybody jokes my after my cousin's wedding, my uncle and the bride's father were like, "Oh, you should just start like a side business and
Side
do this."
hustle.
And I was
hey,
like,
people in sports have side hustles. That's
you know,
a real thing.
I was like, yeah, I don't know. I was like, I kind of just like doing it for like people I know and family and stuff like that. And then when I got this other wedding in September, everybody's like, no, seriously, like you should just do this for people, like offer it up if people are around and are looking for someone. So yeah, I don't know if you want me to officiate your wedding, let me know, I guess.
Joey Goldstein for your golden day. There
Yeah.
you go.
There you go.
There's your tagline.
Yep, perfect. I'm actually it's funny. I'm in my cousin's phone as the Reverend.
Ah, yes.
Certainly not, but
Reverend Goldstein.
certainly not a reverend, but that's how I'm listed in his phone, which is pretty funny. So
That's
yeah,
a
I guess that's
that's
summer.
a great little nugget.
That's
That's a great
summer for
little
me.
nugget. Very nice.
Yeah, how about you?
Our trip to Florida in August, which doesn't sound that nice because I've heard August or Florida in August is
Hot.
hot, but
Humid.
it's hot and humid here, so
Yeah.
it's like, what's the difference? It didn't feel any
Is it
more miserable
is
there.
it more humid? I feel like it
Yeah,
should be. It's definitely
yeah.
more humid.
But it didn't feel like the biggest jump that I thought it was going to be. So we did West Palm Beach for a day and a half just because we got in. One of the days was travel, and then we did a full day there, and the next 2 days we did Disney. After that, my family's huge into Disney, so we went and did that. It was a great trip. Swam in the ocean, which was nice. I haven't done that in a long time.
Which makes sense because you
yep.
now live in Iowa and
No,
you're from Minnesota, so
no,
not
never
really an
lived
option.
never lived on the
Not
coast.
really an option.
No,
Ocean's overrated.
It was nice though. I tell you, like you forget how it was peaceful. I think
Yeah.
our jobs, especially during the season, are so frenetic and straining and stressful. Which, to your point, the payoff is your off seasons. If you get to the point where you've worked long enough or risen to a certain level, you can. And everybody decelerates to some extent, but I can agree with you on that. I got to decelerate a little bit this summer.
Yeah.
You have to do it, or
Yeah.
or in
It drives you
season
nuts.
you'll
how I
burn
see-
out. You'll burn
That's
out.
how I see a lot of people end up leaving sports is because they don't get that time to just really
Mhm.
decompress, and it can be tough.
Yeah. So the ocean part of that trip was great. Just sitting there, and we just sat there for 5 hours, I
Yeah.
think, and you go swim for 30 minutes, you come back, you fall asleep,
See,
you
I'm
get
like,
back up. I
The
really
beach,
like
I'm
that.
so like I don't know. I'm one of those. I'd rather be at the pool than be at the beach. I don't like being all sandy. I think that's
yeah,
just an
I
uncomfortable
think
thing.
I still
I
found
also-
some sand
I'm
in my
good
shorts.
with I'm actually like I'm good with the ocean for like the first like I don't know 5-6 feet, but like I've actually low key is a fear of mine is not being able to like see the bottom of a body of water, like an ocean or like that trips me out so much.
I think everybody's sort of like that because
It's-
you're
I
like,
think it's
what's
called-
below
I
you,
think it's
especially in the
called-
ocean. In the lake, I'm a
Thinking
little
about
better.
it now is
but
like it feels like I got like spiders crawling up my back. I think it's called thalassophobia or something like that.
look at you.
It's a legitimate thing. Yeah. Like
Look
if I
at
like
you.
if you see like if I like see pictures of like people like looking down the ocean that trips me out.
Does Jaws just terrify you? You can't watch that movie? That's
No,
like
I can
the whole
watch-
movie's about
I
that.
can watch the movies, like all that kind of stuff. It's just like seeing that.
Can you
like,
be on a boat
have you ever
in the
seen-
ocean?
Yeah.
You can't be in the water.
I don't want to be in the water.
Yeah.
I don't that feeling of like things swimming beneath me and not knowing what's underneath
That's
me.
eerie. I would agree with that.
And like I love being on the lake. I love like tubing and boating and all
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. I'll jump out and swim with the lake, but like that kind of creeps me
The
out a
minute
little
you
bit
flip
too.
off the tube, you freak out and try to swim back to the
Yeah,
boat. While
it's almost
coming
like
to pick
it's
you
like
up.
what do they say? It's like watching a duck, right? A duck on the surface, they're calm, cool, and collected, and underneath it's just churning.
Fear
My
flying.
my feet are just constantly going because I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
yeah, it's,
You're not only are you trying to propel yourself in the water, but you're also trying to ward off anything that might be having
Yeah.
a look at your feet.
I don't know what's there. Loch Ness monsters. It could be a real thing. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
just that little things like that like trip me out. Like there's one picture I always see it every once in a while. It pops up on like the internet or whatever, and it's someone's like sitting on a ledge in the ocean and their feet are just dangling, and it's just like an endless pit. No, thank you. No thanks.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, what was it? Thalassophobia?
Thalassophobia.
Thalassophobia.
I think.
There's your great fact of the day. Thanks to the Ridin the Bus guys. Thalassophobia. I feel like we almost maybe need to make this a.
Thalassophobia, intense phobia or fear of large bodies of water, which isn't the case, but maybe it's something like
I'm
that.
still saying well done. I mean, you've taught
Yeah.
people a little bit. Fear of deep water. Yeah,
That's kind of what
Google will help
it
you
is,
find
but it isn't. Like I'm not like afraid of the ocean, but it's just that the idea of not knowing what's underneath you that I don't like.
Okay. We've really, really gone on a tangent
Yeah.
here. I think let's bring it back on the rails and let's get us to the end of the podcast. We'll be back next week. I do have another guest lined up. As we've learned to do, we don't promo these guests in case Murphy decides to show up again
Correct.
and make everything go wrong. But we're excited about that next guest for sure.
We are also getting to a point, and this next guest was probably going to be our last one on a weekly schedule.
Yeah.
We're going to get to a point where we're no longer doing weekly episodes just with the season starting. Ben obviously traveling all the time. It's just going to be very hard to nail down a consistent schedule. We're both here. It's not ideal when one or both people, everybody's over Zoom. Like, we don't want that. I think this is a more fun situation for everybody. So we'll probably end up going to definitely one episode per month.
That's the goal.
Probably starting, like, after we have our next episode, we'll probably take a break for a little bit through camp. We'll probably do one in October, and we'll do one per month. But that doesn't mean there can't be multiple. Like, based on the schedule, December is very it's very home game heavy. January is very home game heavy. So if time allows for us to be able to do multiple episodes, we will. But we just don't want to make that promise and guarantee, knowing that it may not be doable.
Yeah, and a lot of the thought process behind that too is we've stayed away from, if you want to call them lower hanging fruit in the off season, just because it's a little easier on our schedules, easier on Brett McLean's schedule, other people, Bill Guerin's schedule, Matt Boldy's schedule, to lasso in some of these higher ranking officers, if you will. So but people like Mike Murray, we want to have Shaky Kraus on here.
Yeah, that's
some players that are
it's
here.
The guys.
This is going to be a little bit more of the trajectory we might take. Not that we might not throw an alumni in there here or there when we can wrangle them in, but the direction that we think we are going to take moving forward once we get done with this next episode is to try to bring in a little more in-house and probably have more people sitting to our left here as opposed to just doing it over Zoom as much.
Yeah, we'll have those people here, and I think we know Shaky's going to have boatloads of stories. We've talked a little bit with Andrew Kaiser, who...
But look, pause on Shaky once. I think we need to bring up the way that he has been trying to get on the show, because I thought yes, right? This is how let's end it with this, because I know he listens, so he'll hopefully catch this and then come, of course, be like, oh, what are you talking about? But this was a really interesting way that he's been trying to elbow his way in as a guest on the show.
Yeah, I don't think Shaky's come to either of us directly.
No.
To ask about being on the show.
No.
And he's here today.
He could be hearing
us.
He could be behind the door.
Pops in, and that'd be amazing if he did that. But yeah, so he hasn't said anything to either of us directly, and obviously we tweet clips and everything, and it all goes out on social. And he's not responding to those either directly. What I caught him doing was responding to Crash, responding to the clips, saying that he wanted to be a guest. So just an interesting way to go about it.
He thought Crash was his in route. Like, I'm gonna tweet at Crash's, not our
He's got
account.
my cell phone number. He's got my email.
He tweets at Crash's specific Twitter account.
Yeah. It was pretty
waiting
funny.
for my invite too or something. You just texted me that. I was like,
I'm
this is
waiting
gold.
for my invite too. Yeah, it was
that
good.
may be how we lead his episode when we have him on.
Yeah, we'll get Shaky on. Andrew Kaiser, another one who spent some time over in the KHL.
Yeah.
He's got some great stories. He's probably someone who, if we are ever in a pinch and need somebody, we can come on. He could tell us a story and take an hour to tell it, I'm sure.
Yeah,
and then obviously
Mike Murray, Tim Army, those will be guys
lot of
we want to
players
get
as
on
well,
too. Yeah,
so.
for sure. So that's a little bit of where we're headed. Again, one more episode on the weekly basis next week. Joey, thank you. A big thanks to Marquise Jones as well. Also to Jeremy Korn, Executive Podcast Solutions, for making this podcast listenable. And, of course, you, the fans, for watching and listening. And last but certainly not least, Brett McLean, for giving us a great amount of time and some great stories. That has been episode 11 of Ridin the Bus, the official Iowa Wild podcast presented by Explore Minnesota. Partner?
2 honks for the win.